Hi everyone. I've met most of you before, so I'm Sema, and I've just started teaching Stage 2 life skills here. A bit of background about myself is that I trained as a teacher down in Cambridge, and I worked in a school there. I worked up in a school in Norfolk, then I went down and did some more training in a school. It was an Islamic school in London. And then I went back to Cambridge and ended up doing a master's in education. So that's my teaching background, and now I'm here. So behaviour management, there's kind of certain ground rules which I think everybody can agree with, but it takes a lot of each person's personality into consideration. So I don't want to tell you this is the correct thing to do and this is how to implement it. I'll give you the basic idea, and then how you actually implement it will depend on what works with your personality. Because if you're trying to be somebody else, you're not going to feel comfortable doing it. The kids are going to see that you don't feel comfortable doing it, and they're going to like be opportunistic and kind of like take advantage of that. So we'll go through a few general behavior management tips, and then we'll open it up to you guys to see if you've had certain situations that you thought were tricky to deal with, and we can go around and maybe brainstorm together what would have been the correct way to handle that situation, or what did you do, what do you think worked well and what didn't work well. And a request from Miss Caitlin as well was to handle how do we deal with parents, because apparently it's not just the behavior of the students we deal with here, but also the behavior of parents. So there'll be a bit about that as well. So what I always say is behavior is all about respect to me. It's respect that I need to give to my kids. It's respect that the kids need to give back to me. And it's respect that the kids need to give to each other as well. And so I think it's really, really important as a teacher that the kids understand that it's not just about them respecting you, but actually having rules in a class is about respecting each other, and it works both ways. I don't want kids to interrupt me. I also want interrupt the kid when a kid is talking to me, and I don't expect them to interrupt each other when they're talking to each other. So it kind of puts us on a level playing field, and it gives them some responsibility. And sometimes with kids, they actually live up to responsibility when you give it to them. You might find that some of the most difficult kids in your class will be the ones that want to help you hand out papers or hand out a pencil or take the register downstairs, and they crave to be given that bit of responsibility to show that you actually trust them, and sometimes that can help them live up to those expectations. So I think it's quite important to do that. So I usually start showing that respect by writing the rules together. Now that doesn't mean that I go, whatever rules you want, that's what we'll do, but it does mean I make suggestions, and I say, for example, rule number 1, if one person is speaking, everybody else is listening. And do you think that rule is fair? Most of the time, they do think it's fair, because if they were the one who was speaking, they would like everybody else to listen. So that's usually a rule. Rule number 2, for example, could be when I want to bring attention to the to myself, because we need to come back to teaching, I'm not going to interrupt you guys. I'm going to count down, okay? So I'm not interrupting, but when you hear the countdown, you know that that's your time to wind up, and when I come to stop, we come back to me. Is that fair? And most of the time they say yes. So I've never actually encountered a situation where people have found it unfair, but if they do find it unfair, dig into that. Why do you think that's unfair? Do you have a better suggestion? And if they're just mucking about, obviously you just push it aside and go with what the majority of the class thinks. And generally, that's how I do it. It all centers around respect. I have very few rules. Those 2 are generally the main 2 that I use in the class. And I remind them of that at the beginning of every single one of my classes until I've had my kids for quite a while. And obviously then they know it. But I'm quite new at FLA, so I still remind them of those, yes.
Yeah, so on that, so I did an exercise of that with Stage 5.
Yeah.
I spoke to them about integrity.
Yeah.
It's about doing what you said you're going to do.
Yeah.
So we have this agreement, and I put it up on the wall, and I always refer to it. Now, my personality, I'm not, I will hear your opinion up to a point. After that is my rule.
Yeah.
Or you're welcome to sulk, but I have nothing to add to that. But when I do refer back to that, and they still don't listen, at that point, my deepest urge is to ask them to leave the class and go sit somewhere else, because you've broken the rule. And my instinct is to do that straight up, not 1 chance, 2 chance, 3 chance. So I don't know which works better. I don't know for that age group, because my background is not in it's in adult teaching. It's a much different environment. I'm
gonna come to consequences because it is going to be different according to the groups. And consequences are important. Obviously, just because we've set the rules doesn't mean that everybody's going to follow the rules. And so you do need consequences, and you need to be consistent in them, and you need to stick with them. So I'm not going to say that, oh, you're right or wrong to do like a warning system and then do the consequence, but whatever you choose, that's what I said, a personality is going to come into a bit. And you have to follow through and be consistent regardless which child it is. The thing is, sometimes you have the naughty kid who comes in with that reputation already. You already know that kids, so you treat them slightly differently, and you have a shorter temper with them than a kid who's usually good and they do the same thing wrong. The bad kid will get a warning and the other one won't. Do you see what I mean? That can't happen. You have to be consistent. You can't bring the baggage of what happened 3 weeks ago into today's class. When we start today's class, they all start with no warnings, and the warning system can begin. But I'll come to consequences in a bit. Write the rules together. Try and use positive language when you're writing rules. It's really, really kind of just about not using don'ts and not using negatives. It does have a psychological impact. So even if a kid's running, it sounds nice to say, please walk, rather than don't run. Or, you know, what else have I've got some examples. You can use thank you requests. So if somebody's chewing gum, sometimes they can be a little bit embarrassed if you just, as you're going around going, thank you for putting your gum in the bin. They haven't done it yet, but you've already thanked them for it. You know, it's a positive way to get them to enforce, and it's a little bit funny, but if somebody said thank you, you're like, oh, I haven't done it yet. Oh, okay, you know, and you put it in the bin. So sometimes it does catch them off guard and you get them to do the thing, and it's just a positive way. It doesn't always work, but it's nicer to try that than straight away going, put your gum in the bin, you know? So try it, you know? Often what I do in my class...
What about sarcasm?
What?
My natural, like, I'll just be sarcastic. Oh, what? Are we grazing? Are we, you know, like, I'll say stuff like that. Like, kids, they just look at me shocked. I'm like, no, so that means put your, you know, my kind of, so I think what I've written in that sheet is I have to learn how to deal with that age group, you know, because it just comes out when I don't know.
One thing about sarcasm, because I'm very sarcastic as well, and one thing I noticed is the older the kids, the more they understand sarcasm. The younger the kids, it can actually like harm their self-esteem because they don't understand that it's sarcasm and they take it quite literally. And in my first lesson here, I think I upset one girl because I was sarcastic, but then we spoke about it afterwards, and now we're like best buds again. So that was but it was a note to myself, because I used to be a secondary school teacher. Again, sarcasm is quite an advanced thing to be able to understand. And it's true, it's like quite hard to rein in when that's your nature. But the older the kids, the more likely you can get away with sarcasm. The younger ones, I try and steer away from it, because I don't think they'll understand it and they'll internalize it. And if you say something like, you know, are you grazing, they're actually going to take into their head like, oh my god, I look like an animal, I look like a cow. You know what I mean? They might not vocalize it, but you'll usually see them shrink. Rather than them like getting in, you'll know it. And if that's the case, you just kind of have a word with them on the side and just be like, you know, it was a joke and blah, 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 and explain the concept. But yeah, you don't want them to, you don't want to smash a kid down because of bad behavior. So that's writing the rules together. Positive language rules, so using things like thank you for doing this, or saying please walk rather than don't run. Try and avoid the don'ts until you really need to. A routine start to the class. Sometimes I find that, you know, the kids come in, they're seeing their friends again because they're not all at school together, and so when you first start the lesson, they're not actually in learning mode yet. And so it's completely useless to sit there and be like, right, today we're learning about blah. So sometimes what I try and do is I try and like ease it up. So I'll add for example, a little game to the register. You know, we're learning about food and stuff like that. So I'll add, okay, today while we're doing the register, I want each person to tell me what their favorite food is and what food group it goes into. Or what did you have for dinner last night and what food group does it go into? So while we're doing the register, it's getting them into the learning mode. Once we finish the register, I can be like, okay, last week, and I recap. I always start with a recap of what I did last week. So the beginnings of my classes are practically identical. I do registration with the game, recap of last week. Hopefully by the time I've done that, they're ready for learning. Because sometimes if you go in straight and go for learning, they want to like ask you, oh, how was school today? Oh, what did you have for lunch today? You know, whatever it is. So kind of having a kind of set routine for the start of the class, it also allows the kids to know what to expect of you every single week. And whether kids know it themselves or not, kids do like routine, and they can adjust to routine better than if they have nothing. Okay, they're too young to be able to make their own timetables and schedules and things like that. You look at, I can just hear, that's my toddler outside causing a fuss. You know, if you don't set nap times for a toddler, they're going to be cranky. We're the adults. We know that a toddler needs a nap, and so you structure their day and you give them a nap time. So I'm not saying that our kids need nap times, but having a structure that they know to predict before they come in is actually helpful to them and will help them get into the stage for learning. Countdown. I've always used a countdown, and it's always been helpful to me. So you can choose to count down from 10, you can choose to count down from 5, you can choose to count down from 3. Depends how much time you want to give them. Usually, if I've put them doing group activities, I'll count down from a higher number so they can start winding up. If they're meant to be doing an individual activity, but obviously they're chatting while they do it, or you know, some of them are finished, so they've started chatting because they're finished, I'll do a shorter countdown. I'll only count down from 3, 2, 1. I usually put my hand up in the air as I'm counting so that people who can't hear me, they can all hear me. But, you know, in theory, they've got a visual as well. What I find is that kids usually in the beginning, they actually join in with you. So once they notice you, their hand's up and they're counting down or whatever. And when you get to stop, you stop. Now, not everybody stops. There's always going to be a little humdrum going on. What I do, if it's a good class, I just do it again straight away. 3, 2, 1. And if they don't, and then I go, I've done 3, 2, 1 twice. Thank you very much. And usually by then it's done, if they're a good class. If it's a class with some challenging behaviour, I use a stopwatch. Once I've done my 3, 2, 1 twice, and there are still people not listening, my stop clock goes on. They're now not just wasting my time, they're wasting the time of all of the kids who were silent the first time I did the countdown. So they're now being disrespectful to their peers as well as to the teacher. So if they waste their peers' time and they waste my time, I'll waste their time. We've got a 5-minute break, I take out from their break. You know, if it's the end of the day, I let everybody finish and pack up and whatever, they can hold back. It's never usually more than like a minute, 1 minute 30, you know what I mean? Because once they know that their time is being wasted and you're going to take away from their fun time, that usually makes them be quiet. So a stop clock is quite a useful tool if you have a really challenging group. And I use this all the way up to like GCSE kids down in England. Some awful classes I had, but no one wants to have their break time or their home time or something like that wasted. They all want to get out of there if they're that kind of child. So that usually works for me. We need to have eyes at the back of our heads. That would be really handy as teachers, but we don't. So the best way of dealing with that is to constantly move around the classroom. I'm literally always wandering around, because then if you're near to them, they're less likely, they're going to feel your presence, they're less likely to be naughty. And that way, if I'm at the front and somebody over there is talking, I have to be like, oh, you know, you're talking. But if I'm walking around and somebody's over there is talking, I just give them a tap on the shoulder and they know that I've noticed them, you know, and I'm continuing my lesson, you know. Oh, fruits and vegetables are good for you. They give you vitamins and minerals and fiber, you know, and you just carry on, you know, and it usually works. Now, if it doesn't work, I usually talk to the kid. Now, I believe talking down to people is not a sign of authority and is not a sign of power. I think showing how strong and confident you are as a teacher gives you the confidence to get down on their eye level and talk to them to their eye level and be like, you've been really, really disruptive. Last week, you were really positive in my class. Can I see that Sasha again today? Or whatever, you know what I mean? And if I'm doing this, usually they want to come back at you because it's kind of like dominating, and it can be seen as kind of like an aggressive standpoint, and so you're more likely to get aggression back or somebody trying to come back. But when you come down, it kind of, we're an equal. It's that respect thing again, and it's showing them that you're giving them that trust, you're giving them, you know, that's okay. So I feel that sometimes with challenging kids, it's much actually less challenging to come down and speak to them on their level. Also, it's not about humiliation, you know? Sometimes if you want to talk to a kid, we don't know what happens in their households. We don't know if they had a horrible day at school. We don't know if they're being bullied in their main schools. We don't know anything about what happens outside of FLA. So sometimes behavior is linked to something that's going on outside. If that kid is being bullied at school, and they come to FLA and they start acting out in FLA as a cause to their bullying, and then you humiliate them in class by like shouting at them and whatever in front of their peers, you're actually going to make the situation worse. But coming down to them and talking to them one-on-one, there's no humiliation. You're not trying to single them out in front of the kids. You're not trying to do anything other than say, look, you're not giving me respect. You're not giving the rest of your classmates respect, and that's not okay. So that's another thing. Giving jobs, like I said, and I often do try and give jobs to the naughtiest of kids. It keeps them busy, and it builds a relationship between you and them. It tells them, I trust you to do this important task for me. Whether that task is taking down the register, whether that task is handing out the sheets, however small the task is, picking a challenging student to help you actually helps to break down barriers that might be up between you and that child. It's easy, especially with more challenging children, to overlook positive things that they do. Very easy. So you have to actively look for an improvement in them. Now, they might be absolutely terrible. So if you take somebody who's absolutely terrible in terms of their behavior, and then one day they're just bad, that's an improvement. Okay? So praise that improvement. Because if they go from bad, then next time they might just go to like average, and then praise them on that, and just, you know what I mean? If you constantly only remember when they're bad, they're going to live up to that expectation, because there's no point. It's so difficult, and I can't do this all the time. You know what I mean? We're all human. But if a terrible kid goes to bad, praise it. You know? Find something to praise. Because honestly, everybody craves, you know, praise. And yes, exactly. Being told, well done, good job. It really makes you feel proud. It makes you feel, you want to hear that more and more. Every human being, regardless, needs that and wants that. So really, really look hard to try and find that for the most challenging kids, especially because they're going to be hearing the negatives a lot, that it's quite easy for us to forget to try and see the positives. I'm not telling you to make them star of the day, but do try and look for the desirable behavior and comment on it. Sometimes we have hardcore lessons where there's a lot of learning to be done packed into one lesson. Kids have short attention spans. So I always try and keep one or two things up my sleeve as a game to break up the session. If you see that they're wandering and drifting, there's no point in just using behavior management techniques to get them to listen to you again, because it's just because their brain is saturated, and the game only takes, 1 to 2 minutes. It can be like, for example, the one that I was telling you is, what did you eat for dinner last night? Oh, you know, just something to break up the class, get them on a different level, and then bring them back to the learning. You can even do something which is called brain gym, and this has been scientifically proven if you're feeling a bit energetic that day, to actually help children concentrate. And I used to use it with my year 7s and 8s a lot at school, because we used to have double science. Nobody wants to have a double science lesson with no break in between. So we used to get up and we used to do brain gym. Brain gym is you write a paragraph about what you're learning that day. So for example, I'll go back to my fruits and vegetables just because it's easy. And you get the kids to stand up and you go, fruits and vegetables, and you literally just get their blood pumping, and they have to recite for each movement is the next word. So fruits and, well, each syllable, vegetables, and that's it. Moving their arms, stepping side to side, and reciting whatever paragraph you've put up on the board, which could be your key message for that day, for example. Something simple. Literally, it takes 20 to 30 minutes, but it's scientifically proven that that's going to re-energize the kids, get them to sit back down and start the class again. So I haven't tried it with FLA kids yet, but it used to work really, really well in my science classes. So I do recommend giving it a go. They might find it funny the first few times, but then it just becomes what you do. You're going to be that quirky teacher who has that quirky routine, but it works, you know. You just need, you're sitting in the same place. Like I was just telling Jenny, I've been sat staring at a computer screen all day. I'm an adult, and honestly, I just, at some point I was like, okay, I'm going to go up and pretend to do some photocopying because I can't stare at the screen anymore. So, and that's us as adults. So yes, sometimes kids need something just to break it up. Consequences. So, all of this stuff is great, but it's not always going to work. So you do need to have consequences. I found it really, really helpful in the schools that I taught at that we had school-wide kind of behavior consequences. What that meant is that if you implement a consequence in a class, it's not because you're a horrible person or you're a horrible teacher. It's just this is the rule of our school. So every class they go into, if they did that same action, the same thing would happen. So they can't argue with you. It's out of your hands. Yeah. And so they won't hate you. You're literally, this is our ethos as a school. You came here, you knew the rules, and this is what we do. So whether that is, giving 1 warning, 2 warnings, 3rd warning, what we used to do is we had 3rd warning, they move and they have to sit on their own in the class. So they're still within the class and they're still taking part of in the class, but they're sitting on their own. So they can't really distract other people or chat to the person next to them. If they're still being disruptive at that point, they go outside of the room. While the kids are doing something, you can go outside of the room, talk to the child, see if they want to come back in and be respectful and whatever. If they agree and they're like, yeah, I want to come back in or whatever, they come back and they're still sitting on their own. And if they don't follow that, they go to the principal. Or the science department where I worked was in an outhouse, so it was a bit silly to send them to the principal because it was about a 7-minute walk to get to the principal's office. So we used to put them in the back of a different person's class, and we just used to always have a bunch of worksheets, even if they're just crosswords or anything, to keep them busy, but in somebody else's class, so they can't engage. Obviously here, you have a choice. Like if it's going to be disrupting another person's class, no, we'll send them to you.
We were just talking about this before you came, the idea of putting them aside is actually a very good one. I don't think we have,
space. It's difficult.
The space problem, So after the 3rd warning, just send them out. They will have to sit in the head teacher's office, like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and then
in the foyer.
Yeah, or in the foyer.
Yeah, there's just cool down period. Because most of them don't want to be excluded. They don't. They're, they're making all of this fuss and stuff because they're amongst their peers and their kids, and their friends, and they want to be the cool one or whatever. So being left on their own outside, that's no fun anymore. So usually, after a little bit of time, they do actually want to join back in the class.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there a definition for what is disruptive? I know what disruptive is, but what is disruptive behaviour in a class? Is there like a bar from which you can judge what that is? So for example, I have girls in my class who come and sit in. Can you get your head up, please? You know, like that kind of stuff, which I find extremely disruptive and disrespectful.
Yeah.
So kind of at that point, I'm like, you need to sit up straight. This not sitting up straight. You sit up straight. Not sitting up straight. You sit up straight.
See, if I've said it more than a couple of times, I would probably give them a warning, and that would be it. Like, because you're having to stop your lesson to tell them to do something. Other things, like I've had people, you know, they come and they've got like their colouring pencils and they're doing their own thing, and so they're not actually engaging in the class. Again, that's something that I use, that I'm walking around and I just tap them on the shoulder, so that they realise that I know what you're doing is not actually what the rest of the class is doing. And again, I'll do that again and again. But at a point, things like that, even, it's not always, a kid's shouting out or it can be things like that. And it will move on to a warning.
That's the same, because like they're not naughty in the sense of like, you know, like a stage 2 or stage 3.
Mm-hmm.
But their disruption is it's much more of a sneaky level.
Yeah. The point being that you can't teach that class.
So it counts. If somebody's slumping, I probably wouldn't give them a warning the first time, but if you're repeatedly telling them and they're not adhering to that, then that's disrespect. So anything that's considered disrespectful, I would put onto the warnings. So I said about consequences as well, they should be uncomfortable but not upsetting. Okay, so a kid should think, I wish I hadn't done that, it wasn't worth it, but it shouldn't be about humiliating them or anything like that. So try and depersonalize it, and that's why I think it's really good to have a school-wide policy, because it does depersonalize it. It's not like, okay, I've got a glitch against this kid because this kid's always ruining my lessons, and so I'm harsher on this kid than that kid. You know, because we're all human, and I'm sure there are certain children that we take to more than others, but when it comes to consequences and things like that, it shouldn't be about whoever's your favourite kid and who's not my favourite kid. And that's why just having it standard across the board, it depersonalises it, and there's less likelihood of it becoming personal, and less likelihood of you hurting their feelings or upsetting them, because that's not the purpose. You can follow consequences through classes. I know I said you start every class with a new clean slate, but for example, I've got 2 kids in my class who, from before I was here, they were told they're not allowed to sit next to each other. So in my very first lesson with them, never met these kids before, I was told, all the kids were like, they're not allowed to sit next to each other, they're not allowed to sit next to each other. I was like, whoa, I don't know any of you. I was like, according to me, everybody's a blank sheet here. I've not been told. And I said to them too, I was like, you're sitting next to each other, but don't make me regret that, because, you know, you won't be allowed to sit next to each other in the future. So I've actually, halfway through that lesson, the second half of the lesson, they weren't sitting next to each other. The next week they came back to me, they said, can we try to sit next to each other again? We will try our best, blah, 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 blah. They sat next to each other, and I gave them that, you know, responsibility, and they were fine. You know, they were good. But that doesn't mean, so you can carry things forward if it's a repeated thingy. But if they come to you and request it, and sometimes, give them the benefit of the doubt, let them know that you're trusting them. You're trusting them with this responsibility because they've come and asked so nicely and politely, etc., etc. So you know that they can behave really well because they've proven to you when they're sitting apart that they can behave really, really well. So show you and prove you right, that you not prove you wrong, prove you right, that you can behave really well when you're sitting next to each other, and give it another shot, you know? Because I found it quite funny when the kids came in. They're not allowed, I don't even know their names yet. Who are they that they're not allowed to sit next to each other? No, you know, so obviously it's been carried forward. But when you get a new class or something like that, how can I judge kids based on what somebody else has said? It's not fair. So, things like losing a choice of where you sit is an appropriate way to give a consequence, which is not personal. You know, they've proven it. And it's not like, them two are always chatting with each other, but they're allowed to sit next to each other, and we always talk to each other, but we're not allowed to sit next to each other. If people constantly chat with their neighbour, try them with a different neighbour. It's not personal. So, 3 warnings, we've gone through that. Right. Shall I move on to parents a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. So, parents are more challenging than the kids, I think. And that's because in every parent's eyes, their child is their baby, their precious one, and they don't see that we have a whole class to deal with. They see just their child. Okay? So when they come and speak to us, they want to feel from us that we are on the same page. And at the end of the day, this is the message we need to get across to them. The main message we want to have parents believing is that we are on the same side. We both want the best for your child. We both want them to succeed. You know, this is why we are teachers. We don't want one child in our class failing, but we want all of those kids in our class to succeed. So, if the behavior of one child is stopping the rest succeeding, yes, there needs to be a consequence. But that doesn't mean we don't want your child to succeed. That is our ultimate goal. And that's what we need to work together on. So, I think it's nice for parents to know what our classroom management systems are at FLA. They can know this is what we do. We have a warning system. It is not personal. It is used across the board. Every teacher will be using the same thing. This is what we do. We set rules in the beginning, like beginnings of class. Our rules are A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. Have this at the beginning of each year, come back signed by the parents. Signed. So they've read it and they've signed it. If parents come in upset at us at a later date, you refer back. Do you remember at the beginning of the year we had a contract? This was a behaviour contract. This is how the whole of FLA works. This is the rule that your child broke, and that's why there was a consequence. Okay? Next week, he or she will start on a clean slate. And we hope that it won't occur again, but that is our explanation for why that happened. Do you see what I mean? Like, if they've all seen how we manage behaviour here, and they've all read it, and they've agreed to it, and they've signed it, again, we've depersonalised it. We're not just doing that for your child. We're doing that for any child that commits that same behaviour problem. So, yeah. Another thing is be the first story home. If there has been an incident or something like that, write a little note in their book, or write even just a little piece of paper and like rip it and give it to the child and say, can you please give this note to your parent? So if you think there might be an issue, be the first story home. Write a little note saying, today we had to move Abdullah in class because he was disruptive with his neighbour, but we're really keen to see an improvement in next week's class, and we know that he's a great kid. You know, always put a positive in there. When a parent comes to you, again, best thing that a parent wants to hear is a positive about their child. Be like, you know what? I was so upset by this as well, because, you know, Abdullah is such a good kid and he does so well usually in Islamic studies, especially when we were studying about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, you know, so I was so disappointed to see that he wasn't focusing in this class. But always, you know, big up the kid and remember a positive, because even the, you know, hardest of children have a positive. They have something that they excel at, something that they're good at. Always remind the parent of that, because then they'll believe, okay, they do know my kid's great. Okay, it was just a one-off occasion that my kid needed to be disciplined, but actually, in general, my kid's doing great. And they can see that. Again, these are their precious gems, are their children. So when they come to a teacher, it can be quite aggressive. It's not personal. It's like the lioness looking after her lion cub. You know, if we went to try and stroke a lion cub, the lioness is going to come and scratch our faces. It's not personal, but the lioness is just protecting her cub. So we have to remember that as well. Be prepared to give specific examples. So it's always, like I said, not just about the positive thing, but even about the negative thing. The more specific you can be about why you had to have a consequence, give out a consequence, the better. Because then they'll know it was a one-off occasion and you're not just kind of like doing this blanket thing on their child. It was a specific occasion when, you know, Safiya was sitting next to Amna and blah, 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 blah. It was just that one occasion. Again, it isolates it. You're not painting their child as a bad child. It was a bad occasion that their child was involved in. If you get caught off guard, sometimes quite a while after a situation or whatever, something resurfaces and a parent comes in or calls in and is like, rah, 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 and you're not in that mindset, you're not there, you know? That was all the time. Don't feel pressured to answer on the spot. Be like, thank you so much for bringing up that concern. I'm going to go have a think about it and talk to my colleagues about it, and I'll get back to you. And even if you don't talk to anyone, if you do want to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. But even if you don't want to answer impulsively and then regret your answer later and think in retrospect, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Or maybe, why didn't I say this? Like you were saying about these questionnaires, sometimes you need to let it sink in before you answer. And I think that's especially true with parents. You know, sometimes they just come in your face and you're like, what am I going to say? Just be like, thank you so much for bringing that up. Would you mind if I give you a call in half an hour, tomorrow, next week, whatever you need? Take that time and then get back to them. That way, if you do need to discuss it with Caitlin, other teachers, just get it off your chest and come to the best decision on how to handle it and then get back to them. Absolutely fine. Make a paper trail. So if a parent does call you or anything like that, it can be hard because you have this conversation. Next week, they might come to you and say, you said blah, 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 blah. And you're like, because it was all verbal. Try and make a note of anything that you said to them, like what their issue was and what you said to them in response. And have that written, because that way you can be like, I really don't think I said that, but if you interpreted it like that, I'm really sorry. But here, let me look through my notes to see what I actually said. And you go through that. So, because it can be like Chinese whispers otherwise, can't it? Like you hear something and then in your head you construe it to be something else and a week later. But if you've got it written down, that's a really, really useful thing to have to go back to. You can even email the parent back after the phone conversation if you want to, saying, just to recap what we discussed today, blah, 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 blah. You know? And kill them with kindness. Sometimes, I used to work in a shoe shop back when I was a student. And sometimes you get the most fussy people coming in and you're like, and literally, you just, as if somebody's sewn a smile on your face. You know, you literally just have to raise yourself above and be the most pleasant person in the world, even though inside you're bubbling up, and just be like, oh, your son's the best. You know, that's when sarcasm comes in handy. No, but honestly, sometimes you just need to do that. Sometimes it can be so taxing that the only thing you can do is kill them with kindness. Maybe the parent has had a really bad day at home, and you know, you're their outlet. We don't know. So again, let's hope that we kill them with kindness and it kind of blows over. And sometimes parents they kind of just like, eventually they just come and they offload and you realize, oh, okay, you were actually just having a really hard time, you know? So I think we always need to bear that in mind. Even as Muslims, like, we're meant to make excuses for one another. So I know there are people who are consistently difficult and that is just their personality, but that might not always be the case. So if we take the standpoint of starting with killing them with kindness, then maybe you made that person's day better and you'll never have that problem with them again. I've got handouts just with the key points for each of these. After that, if you guys... Sure.
With kindness?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say,
maybe we had a very bad day.
Yeah,
yes, but you have to say, you know, professional. What I wanted to say is that sometimes the parents, they come in, they're already on the defensive because they're so afraid that you will say such bad things about their kid. So if you're being nice and you're actually explaining what you said before, your child is doing very well.
Exactly.
There's nothing, you know, actually wrong, but just this one occasion, this is not acceptable. So they will calm down. And they understand that it's nothing, again, they just come and they're already, so protective.
Because they don't know what it's like inside FLA. They don't know that every single week, actually, you're like praising their child so much. It was just this one time. They don't know. So it's always good to start with the praise and how good their kid is. If you can give specific examples, even better. Oh, no, I've already photocopied them. I've done these big
Okay. But that's why I asked you, do you want me to copy?
Oh, sorry, I might hand them out.
Okay.
They're all in order so that each person just gets 2, and that should be 2 different sheets, if that makes sense.
Here we go.
So, yeah.
So I'm the naughtiest. You give me
Yes. No. So if you guys have questions, feel free to ask questions, and then after that, if you guys have any specific situations that you want to relay to the group and then have the group input on that specific situation, then that's always good practice as well.
I have a few questions. So you know how you were saying about moving around in class?
Yeah.
I completely agree. I find it really difficult in the stage that you are teaching us and stage 2. You know how they have their coats on the floor and things like that. So we started a rule that you have to put your coats on your chairs because you trip. And I find it sometimes so difficult to just like move around and keep that, especially at the back.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know what? Don't be afraid to rearrange the classroom as well. Set it out in the best way possible to you. So like, as a science teacher, like trip hazards and things can actually be really, really bad. So like everything, the floor should be clear. If there was a fire, la samahallah, you know what I mean? We need to exit the building. So floor spaces and everything like that should be clear. So even if you come from it from a safety standpoint, again, it depersonalizes it. It's not that you're a horrible teacher. We want to keep them safe. We love our children, blah, blah, blah. If we needed to evacuate quickly for any reason, this is why all the pathways need to be clear. So yeah, I do find this issue. I do try and walk around a bit, but yeah, it's a bit awkward because the
2 sides that you can't actually reach.
Yeah. So what I still do go round, like, and say the table that's to the back right, I'll walk up, and I don't manage to get to the kid at the back, but I do put my hand down on the table.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, and then if I'm standing there and there's still like they've not noticed that I'm there, I kind of start tapping on their table.
Not that clear.
Do you know what I mean?
We were just discussing before, I had a meeting with one lady, educator, who was sent by the city council. She will do the next training for us.
No.
And we discussed this, touching the kid issue, and she said, oh no, not only don't touch them, but don't touch things that are actually, connected to them. For example, the chair. And she said that she actually had, this experience that she was walking around and she put her hand on the chair of the child, and the child was, doing this, and then just tripped and hit the chin, and then went home and said, the teacher actually pushed my chair, and that's why I hurt myself.
See, like and this might be very naive of me, but I kind of hoped that children in FLA and of the parents of, the children of FLA wouldn't be of that time. Like, and different schools that I've taught in the past, I had to handle completely differently. The school that I taught at for the longest was Parkside. And to be honest, once you build up a relationship with the kids, and we're not allowed to hug kids or do any of that kind of stuff to kids and stuff. You're not meant to touch them in any way, shape or form. But my kids would run up to me and give me hugs, and I'd just stand there like this, and they'd all laugh, and they'd be like, Miss, I want a hug. I'm like, can't give you a hug. It's against the rules. You know what I mean? But it just gets to say, you know your class and you know your students. So table tapping just in front of their thing. Like if you feel like they're that kind of kid, then obviously err on the side of caution. If I was teaching in certain schools here in Dundee, I would not touch the kids. I would really protect myself at every level, because it has become, unfortunately, like in my day when I was at school, if a teacher told me off, I would be quaking in my boots, not because the teacher was telling me off, but because a note was going to be sent home to my parents, and my parents would tell me off 5 times over because I got told off at school. It's now become that the kid gets told off at school, they go and tell their parents that they get told off at school. The parents come in and shout at the teacher. What? So the environment has shifted a lot, and I would make the judgment based on the kids that you have, and also the age of the kids. I feel like, you know, with our stage 2 kids, they're still quite young, and so they're still, you know what I mean? That's okay. I think that kind of stuff starts happening once they get a bit older, and they start thinking, yeah, I could get this person in real trouble, but they're not old enough to realize that actually you can ruin somebody's life. You know, a teacher could lose their license if that gets taken to a higher level. That, when you get to, say, you know, the end of senior school, that's when they start understanding that. But you've got that period in the middle where they're old enough to be quite creative and manipulative, but they're not old enough to understand the true consequences. So yeah, for the little ones, I think giving them a pat on the head or something, I don't think any kid here is gonna, well, from the stage 2s that I've met, they've all been great so far. To be honest, yet again, most of them have come up to me and kind of like given me a hug at the end of class and stuff like that, and I'm a bit like, okay. But yeah. Yeah. I know. A proper one. No, I know. I'm like, but yeah, tapping on the tables and things like that. Just having the awareness that you are there, you're present, and you see what they're doing, and you know what I mean? Like, that works, just being a presence around them. So with the awkward spacing, tapping on the table, and if you feel like the kids are of an age or of a kind of mentality that, okay, no, then yeah, again, just putting your hand there. What's anyone going to say about that?
I have another question.
Yeah.
So with stage 2 again, sometimes it's like when one kid wants to show you something. So you might have this in with stage 1. Oh, my finger's bleeding, and there's like nothing. And then there's like 5 behind that child showing you. And the other day I was just like, how do I put this really nicely to them? As in, like, you know what, inside my head I was like, I don't actually care. You know, like, you want to show me your nail bleeding? No, because I know, like, none of them has ever. There's been one occasion when a child came and and I was like, go down to Miss Aisha, she'll give you a plaster. But I was like, in my head, you're coming, and then there's like a million after you who are standing to show me, and that's like 5-10 minutes trying to just, you know.
That happens a lot. They
what should I do?
get so sidetracked that you don't have time for your lesson. So what I do is, like, if the first person comes up, you give them the benefit of the doubt that it's going to be something relevant. When it's not relevant and you see the line, what I do is I actually stop. I do my 3, 2, 1, and I stop while they're still there. And I just say to them, I was like, do you know what? We've got some fun activities coming up today. If we want to have time to do them, then we're going to make sure that any comments or interruptions are relevant. So I go down the line. Is it relevant? I ask every single one, is it relevant? Is it relevant? Is it relevant? Most of them are like, no. And I was like, so can it wait till break time? And then they go back. So I do, and usually it's quite easy because it's like, I do life skills. So there's, you know, they're either doing like tasting fruit and veg, or we're making fruit parfaits. And there usually actually is an activity that they all want to be doing. But genuinely, I do the learning at the beginning of the class. So if we don't get through the learning part, they're not going to get to do the fun activity. So if you get in the habit of having some kind of game or something like that at the end of class, and you just say to them, do you guys want to have time for this? Because then we have to keep it relevant. And I still never want to shut down kids, because I want them to be, you know, engaging in class, and I want them to contribute, and I want them to, but keep it relevant. So like, I think it was like National Book Week or something. So a lot of them had memorized poems, and they all wanted to say their poems. And I was like, woohoo!
It's finished.
I know. So I said to the whole class, I was like, do you guys want to hear the poems? And most of them did. I said, then this is what we're going to do in break time. I was like, in break time, they took out their food and stuff like that, but they stayed sat down, and one by one, the ones who wanted to do their poetry came up and recited the poem to the class. And I did, out of respect for the ones doing the poems, kept the class quiet, but that's because the majority of the class agreed that that's what they wanted to do. So I do try and let them do it, like in their break time, if it's something like that. But yeah, otherwise, just say, is it relevant, is it relevant, is it relevant? And like in a nice, friendly way, as in like, you know, only because I want you guys to do the fun thing at the end, you know? So that's how I deal with them, because yeah, it happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yes,
I had a question about you're talking about consequences.
Yeah.
You said that sometimes, I can't remember when you were saying it, but actually like doing it in a way that doesn't pick on someone.
Yeah.
So like we had an incident in stage 5 when one of the girls had clearly plagiarized. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
She'd written a poem, and I seen the poem and I thought, you don't even know what these words mean.
Yeah.
I googled it, and it was literally the first poem that came up on Google. And I spoke with Caitlin, and we decided the best way to do it is to address the whole class and speak about plagiarism. And I was kind of in two minds about it, because definitely like the girls we did a reminder about what, you know, the definition of what is copying and what you're not allowed to do. But at the same time, I felt like that specific child got away with it because her nature is cut corners, lazy, you know. So it's kind of finding a way to not make that child feel distressed, but also make them realise what you've done is something very bad, and it's not going. It is not going to be well. Not going to do well for you. Like you're coming on for your exams. You've got all the things to like look forward to.
No, plagiarism is a really serious thing.
And when not to be vague.
If I was addressing the whole class about plagiarism, which I think it's really important to do, I would address the whole class without anybody needing to. Nobody needs to know why you're talking about that.
I did, but I would still got the message.
Talk to her on the side.
On the side, okay.
Yeah. So it's just about not talking to everybody about plagiarism and giving her as the example, because that just makes you feel unnecessarily bad. But it's not about not addressing it with the person. It's about addressing it, but not in front of their peers, so that they don't feel humiliated.
The problem is it's such a small class. Like it doesn't matter what you do, they will still know it's that one. You know, and like it's like an episode of Friends. You know, it's like it's the one who's lazy, it's the one who's emotional, it's the one who's gobby. You know, like everyone knows who is what. So it's kind of tricky to manage that and not bring down their self-esteem, like you said.
Especially with teenagers.
To build them up.
I just like if they're all leaving at the end of the day, I'd be like, oh, you know, Hafsa, can I just speak to you for a second? You know, so everybody's leaving, and you keep them back for a second. So it could be about anything. And then just have a quick word. You know, say, you know, that talk about plagiarism, blah, 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 you remember your poem, you know, and just explain that if that happened in your exams and things like that, they would actually just, you know, nullify and consider your exam papers void. And, you know, it's just a really serious...
And also while we're on this age group, so the girls seem to have emotional tiffs, which spill out around the classroom. So the last lesson, we did 2 hours purely on bullying, but I related that to, so we were doing like a unit called Daughters of Eve. So I related that to the people who were trying to learn about and mirror, you know, that what is their behaviour and what does Islam demand of us, but also you need to understand that what this and this is, it is bullying. If that's how you hear it and define it, if that's what you know from school, then that's what you know. But again, it wasn't targeted at one specific person, it was for the whole class. But the one specific person who I thought needed it the most was the one who was the most kind of averse or like challenging the concept. No, that's not, this is not that. But it's dealing with that in a way that's not emotionally breaking them further. And figuring out why are you being a bully? But like, how do you deal with that in class when they're literally sitting there huffing and puffing and sometimes crying and sometimes, oh, I don't want to sit here and I don't want to do this.
It's teenagers are like really tough. A big thing is, and I used to say this to my kids all the time, is that honestly, if you don't want it done to yourself or you don't want it said to yourself, then don't let it come out your mouth or don't do it. You know? So get them to break things down, because sometimes they don't realize that it's bullying, or they're just lashing out, or they've just had a bad day or whatever it is. But it's so, you know, and sometimes you do say something that hurts somebody else's feelings and you think that it's justified at that time. A few hours later, you think to yourself, actually, I probably could have put that nicer. So another thing is that realizing, if that would have hurt my feelings if somebody had said that to me, actually it's a sign of strength for you to go back and address that with that person and tell that person, you know what, I should have put that in a nicer way. That's a sign of strength. That is not a sign of weakness. And that applies to all of our students. If we discipline them in a way that we're not overly proud of, go back and talk to that student the next week or something like that. It is not a sign of weakness, and honestly that will grow a really nice connection between you and that student, and they will really appreciate it. And for teenagers especially, like, teenagers probably more than anybody do things that they end up regretting, and that sometimes it's them beating themselves up that actually breaks their self-esteem and stuff. So letting them know that actually a sign of strength is to be able to self-reflect, because we all say things that we wish we hadn't said, we all do things that we wish we hadn't done, but a sign of strength and goodness in your character is to be able to go back and be like, yeah, I could have done that better, and then share that with the person who was involved.
Well, just to share with all the, like, everybody, we did this awesome exercise. It was on self-acceptance. This was on, like, the back end of the 2 hours that we done. So, like, the very last exercise we did was asking the children, or the girls, to write down in 2 different columns. One, what are the positive messages that you get from the people in your life? It can be anybody, and I want you to really think about that and write them down. You know, so your mum, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, friends, whoever it is. And then I want you to think about all the negative messages that you get and write them down. And like the girls got really deep, they were getting really emotional, and then I was like, well, these, trying to make them understand that the negative messages that you put out, so whether you're putting it out for your peers, leads to a negative message from your heart to your brain, that, oh, I am that, I am stupid, or I am ugly, or I am not good enough, you know, and kind of bring that round full circle to say that whatever messages that are coming out in this class is the messages that your peers are taking away, and that's where you're all living. Either it's negative or it's positive. And it was nice for them to actually look at that, oh, what are the negative things that I feel about myself, because other people make me feel like that. So I don't know how that would break down into like a younger group, but to make them see how it feels to have someone be negative towards you, which I think in FLA for our kids, you know, with the behaviour issues that we're getting, I think it would be like a good way to let them see, how do you feel when someone tells you you're dumb?
Well, I do that with the stage 2s, because sometimes somebody makes a comment and it might not, you know, it might be a comment that the rest of the class find is stupid or, you know, silly, or they knew that already or whatever, and so they might laugh or whatever. And I have a policy that there is no such thing as a stupid comment in my class. No such thing. Any comment is valued, any question is valued, and anybody who laughs, that for me is a behaviour issue. And I will not give a warning the first time, but I will give them a reminder. How would you feel if people laughed when you spoke? Would you like that? No. So if that occurs again within that same class, then it would be a warning again, because it becomes a behaviour thing, because they've been made aware of it.
They snigger a lot. And it's actually heartbreaking to watch, because you see a couple of the girls in the class just start feeling really small. And at that point you try and step in, but then you realise actually this whatever's happening is also happening out with FLA, because they're all friends. So it's not something you can just manage in class. You could do your bit, but ultimately, you know, it's
There is one issue is on the opposite side of this, is that if you have a very shy student, the minute you put your eyes on her to ask for something, she starts crying. So what you can do, I mean, I've been trying lots of things, speaking to her with all of them, but at the end, she will be left alone.
Do you know what? It's so hard with shy children. And I would say, if you have any opportunity to pair them up with a child that you think might complement, like if you have a really, really kind child in your class, a really generous child or whatever, trying to pair them up. And also as a teacher, always overpraise them, you know, for the smallest thing, like the whole behavior thing, but for the smallest thing, so that they know you're being noticed in a positive way. So if you come out of your shell, you're going to get more praise. Not, you know what I mean? It's not like you're going to be noticed and like, oh, because your work is wrong, and so that's why I'm being quiet, because I just don't want to be wrong. You know, because that's a lot of it sometimes, you know, like if we knew all the answers, we're probably going to, or we think we know all the answers, we're probably going to be like, yeah, and put your hand up all the time and take part all the time and stuff, because you think that you know it all. But if you're unsure of yourself, then you're going to not want to be seen, because in case the teacher asks me a question and I get it wrong, you know? So I would say a lot of praise for the kid if they've done work in their book, if they've done anything, like just a lot of praise, so that they start associating participation with the teacher and interacting with the teacher with something positive. Then hopefully over time they might come out of their shell, especially if they're sitting next to someone, like I said, somebody who's kind, somebody who doesn't mind sharing, because you might get a shy kid who just one time they're like, oh, can I borrow your ruler, or whatever it might be, and they're sat next to somebody who like shuts them down, like, no, it's mine, you know what I mean? Again, that's it, they're going to withdraw and they're probably not going to come out of their shell again. So making sure that they're sat next to somebody that if they do contribute, or if they do come out of their shell, is going to be received in a positive way. So it's being received positively by the teacher and by whoever they're sitting next to.
I tried appraising.
Yeah.
For one thing, for handwriting,
Yeah.
for example, I always show her handwriting because it's really nice.
Yeah.
But there isn't anything else
No.
I can. Every time I ask the children to say the surah, for example,
Yeah.
because it's a Quran memorization, she will look at me frightened. So I said, did you memorize the surah? She said yes, but I don't have time to go with her alone
Yeah.
outside to check.
Yeah.
And the time is very short
Yeah.
for one lesson.
Yeah.
So taking her out, it will be after school time.
Have you ever paired them or put them in small groups of 3, and instead of saying it out loud, they say it to each other?
Okay.
And then you can stand behind her and listen to her say it, and then praise her on that, on the verbal.
Okay, I'll try
See
this.
that?
Yeah.
Because maybe she'll be okay saying it just to another kid, and if all the other kids are doing it to each other, she can see that they're not listening to her.
Okay.
It's just her and one other person talking to each other, so maybe she'll recite
Yeah.
it that way.
Thanks.
Anything else?
We just need to bring a few kids in, and then we'll have issues.
Yeah, I know, right? Then we'll have the examples.
It's so hard
Yeah,
to
it's,
remember. What is all the issues I
there's-
always have in class?
There's one another thing is you have overactive kids, but they're doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like to shout at them,
Yeah,
so you are always forgiving them.
yeah,
But the other kids doesn't understand this rule
yeah,
with those.
yeah.
So if you shout at them, they will say, why you are shouting at me, leaving
Yeah.
them doing whatever they
Yeah.
do.
That's why
They
for the
want.
active kids, because I've got a girl like that in my class, and I can tell she's really good, but she's really active, and so she's always quite disruptive, but kind of like in a positive way, if that makes sense. But I still end up giving her warnings because it's still disruptive to the class, and you need to set that example.
Yeah.
And she's the one that I choose a lot, without her asking or whatever, because she's up and about and doing all that. She's the one a lot. I'm like, oh, can you hand out this for me? Can you do this for me? You know, can you write something on the board for me? So always try and like transform, like use their energy. Yeah, in a positive way.
But it sometimes
It's hard.
doesn't
It is
help.
hard, I know. And that's why also the brain gym thing. The brain gym, if they're memorizing something, memorize it using actions, because it's been proven, you know, when you do the rub your stomach and pat your head, or pat your stomach and rub your head, that whole thing, you know, it has been shown that if you're reading stuff and doing stuff while doing this, you actually engage your body with your brain, and you actually remember things better.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's Quran and all of this kind of stuff, but if there's other things that they need to memorize, then, you know, trying using actions to memorize, even if you put, like, for the words, if, like, it's hand, you know, put your hand up when you're memorizing yed, if it's sky, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sama, like, all that, like, try and make something active so that they can positively use up some of their energy in the class. I know it takes more effort from us, but it can help, because there are some kids who are just naturally energetic. Yeah.
Can I just ask, I'm just wondering what happened, or if this is still done, because I'm only in once a week. You know, we used to have visually in the classrooms, 5 to start, 5 to finish, so it's 5 rules to settle them in, 5 to finish. How often did everyone still totally stick to that? And then we had like the 4 rules of respect, so it was respect Allah, respect yourself, respect people around you, and respect the environment.
My kids taught me that when I first started my first lesson, I didn't know any of the rules for here. So when I first started, they're like, we know this, because I started with respect, but like just what I was saying. They're like, we know this, and I was like, what do you mean you know this? You don't know me. And so they actually showed it to me on the wall.
Okay.
So yeah.
Because I'm just looking, because it's not here, but I don't know.
Once a week, I have to go over we start with the 4-hour rules, and then we do the 5 to start, 5 to finish, just to get
still consistent.
for them to know.
Stage 4, they have the copies on the wall.
Okay.
Here we don't have.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, the other classrooms, I think they don't have it on the wall.
I think it's like you were saying about routine. It honestly just makes things. You start, kids know. You know what to expect, and at the end it's like, okay, we're not going to go until the classroom is tidy, we're tucked in our chair. They know, and we do our dua and so on. But I do find especially at the beginning, that's and it's really good, and also good to remind the children about the respecting, because I always have kids who are like, they're just speaking over you, and it's like, no, it's rude. Do you remember our rules? You cannot speak over. You have to respect others and blah blah blah.
Okay.
So even when we're going for prayer, I make the kids line up at the end of break, and we don't walk through until they're all lined up and quiet, and then they walk through. Just, again, it sets them up for what they're going into. Because if they're all running into it, you know what I mean, and then you ask them to stand in lines and be quiet, we do that bit when we're still in the classroom, and then walk through into prayer. So hopefully they're already they've already wound down from their break. I know prayer time's moving again, but
also, if the most of the class are understanding, but there is 1 or 2 didn't get the point, and there isn't much time to spend with them, especially here. The time is flying very fast. So I always left with the guilt when I go home, thinking of them, how I can give them more time, or have a separate time with them.
I would say, again, if you can have maybe an extra worksheet or something, or not even a worksheet but a summary sheet that you can send home with them just to look over, that maybe the other kids don't have, but just the key points that they needed to know, then at least that would give them time to go over on their own.
For example, sometimes exercise. I explain it, but when they come back, sometimes they didn't get the point. It shows that they didn't understand it well.
Also, use each other, use the students, because sometimes kids talk to each other in a language that they understand better than what we do. So sometimes I do that. I ask, for example, we were talking about fibre. We weren't even meant to learn about fibre, but one of the kids asked about it. And so I was describing it in my way, and I could see, some people picked up on it. Some people were like, whoa, And so I was like, okay, so who can tell me what fibre is? And then whoever put up their hand really keenly, I was like, okay, can you explain to the class what fibre is? And so I had only just done it, but it got explained again in kid language.
Yes, I do sometimes do this. I pair them with someone who understood it well. Yeah, it happens sometimes, but sometimes it's just leave them with me.
Is there somewhere I can go and check what the vocabulary level of that age group is meant to be?
Do you know what? That's one of the main things that we struggled with in our teacher training course, because there's not actually anywhere where you can check that for age stage. What we did, one of our colleagues for science classes actually made a dictionary of terms and then the appropriate words to use for school-age children. And so, I know, but that's because we faced that problem so much. Like, words that we use in our everyday language we forget actually it's not appropriate for that age stage, and so we're actually confusing them more. So it was something that they made into a project while we were in teacher training to actually make this dictionary of words. So I don't know,
it's
like
words that I think are really basic, like an assumption.
Yeah.
Like you're 13, you don't know what assumption is.
Yeah.
You don't know what
Yeah,
to
you forget.
assume is.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't know? No, we don't know what to assume.
Do you know what the good thing is? The younger kids will ask, because the younger kids do that to me. The younger kids, what does that mean?
They're good.
Yeah, they always ask, but you're right. As they get older, again, they become shy because they don't want to look stupid in front of people. So it's tough, that one. It is tough. Obviously, if it's worksheets and stuff like that, it's something that you have that you can look over it and be like, okay, how can I simplify that? Always, the more basic, the better. You know what I mean? So if it's a written thing, but when you're speaking, that's when it's really hard.
Yes, yeah. Honestly, there's just some like words that you think,
Yeah.
are you genuinely pulling my leg, or
Yeah.
are you being serious?
Yeah.
Like, no, miss, we don't know.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is one struggling word, especially when I try to explain, translate Quran, is making an oath or
Yeah.
swear.
Swear,
Swear? Oh my God! And it was so much time for them to settle down. And get
The teachers swear. And then they go home and say, the teacher's
No,
swearing.
I-
The teacher's just telling us. The teacher's teaching us that Allah is swearing.
Yeah.
Yes, wallahi,
Yeah.
every time. And all the surahs they've been learning now, it started
Swear.
with wa, swear. Swear? Oh, and they never stop.
Paying attention, huh?
Yeah.
That's what they like most about
No,
wa.
it's tough. It is tough. Do you know what? I've done it with the stage 2s a lot, where I'm just talking, and then I realise myself, like, I kind of like, okay, that was a big word, so I actually say the same thing again, but I break it down. I'd be like, so what that means is, and then I actually say the sentence again.
You know, like I do try and do
Yeah.
that, but like when we did like a little feedback session, and like the girls were, oh, can we just like put stuff up on the wall and do this, and can you please not use big words?
Oh.
And I know, because I know that I do that,
Yeah.
but even in my consciousness when I'm trying not to do that, they're finding those like terms or words even too big.
Yeah.
And either I'm forgetting what it's like to be 12 and 13, or I'm thinking,
Yes. We're getting old, don't worry.
so like that's something I was just wondering if there's somewhere I can go to see, you know, like the level they're meant to be at.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'll go and have a Google, because obviously when I did my training, it was a few years back now. So maybe there's like a great website that I'll actually have a look through some. I'll look like on the Times Educational Supplement and
Probably have some generalities like how many words they're supposed to know, but the
Yeah.
number is not very helpful, is it?
no.
But Mary, you
But-
say things that we don't even No, I know, but like a basic word like assumption. No. Like, you know, like I'm talking.
Okay, I'll solve it
I
for
do.
you.
I take what you're saying on board, because I know that about myself, and I really try with all my might to simplify it,
Yeah.
and they're still staring at my face. And like, I actually don't know how to say it.
You're like, I'm done.
You know, like write down the words that they don't understand, and then you'll have like that dictionary.
Yeah.
And then you give them
that's
the
the
meaning.
thing,
Yeah.
actually.
You know, you probably it's going to be the same words that you mention
Yeah.
again and again, but they're like,
Yeah, make a
Because
note of
part
them.
of me feels like it's a good learning for them. So for
Yeah.
example, we're talking about the properties upon them's early life, talking about like not polygamy, talking about even I've lost the word.
Getting old,
No.
Maria.
What is
don't you know?
polytheism, right?
Totally, yeah.
So I was saying, look, monotheism is when you worship one god, so Allah, and then polytheism is just multiple gods.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I was like, look, I'm not going to say multiple gods. I'm going to use this word so that it's in your head.
Yeah.
Like you're not too young to
Yeah.
learn a word. Like
That's
once you learn
true.
it, then
Yeah.
you should know it, right?
Yeah.
So like I do try and do that. I'll explain
Yeah.
what the word means, but then continue to use
Use
that
the
word.
Yeah.
But like they did say to me, can you go on that? I'm like, I don't know, I'm so sorry.
It's good for them.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but the thing is, actually, they don't know sometimes if they're pulling your leg or if
Yeah.
they just want to waste some time. I did when last week when I was not here, I did Arabic with them, and I took a text and I was trying to explain to them, like it was without any harakat. So I
Yeah.
said, like, okay, so the cases I would like you to read it and tell me, to explain it, the subject, there's object, and they're like, oh, what is a subject? And I'm like, okay, well, how can I explain it to you?
What is water?
But I actually feel it's a reflection of how the education system has changed. Kids don't learn about grammar anymore.
No.
They're not taught technical words for like beyond a noun and a verb.
Yeah.
They're not taught anything else about structure, or so when you're trying to speak to them about, they're like, eh?
Yeah.
You're like, no, don't do that to me. This is not good.
No, honestly, we in the school that I was teaching at, I always come back to that school just because it's now a centre of excellence, and they took 2 failing schools in the city and actually made them a federation, and they've raised the attainment of those other 2 schools. So it was actually a really nice example of a school. And actually, just this year, it was in the newspaper that they are the highest ranked school in the whole of the county.
Okay.
So it's a really, really good school. And one thing that they used to do, what were you saying? Grammar. All teachers, regardless of your subject, I was a science teacher, we still had to mark spelling and grammar. Okay, across the board, because I would get kids writing about science, and because of the way that people spoke, they'd say of. So of, they would spell it O-V, not O-F. Okay, so and then that, that. They would actually write how they spoke. And so their spelling and their grammar was atrocious. And it's not the job of a science teacher or a maths teacher or whatever, but it was just getting so poor that you couldn't just leave it to the English teachers on their own. And so it became a school-wide thing. All of us, when we're marking, we're not just marking their science knowledge, we're also marking their spelling and grammar as well.
This was in a secondary school?
Secondary school. Secondary school.
Yeah, they were failing schools.
Yeah.
It's a question also sometimes how much the dialect gets into your written language. When we moved into the flat where we're living right now, I actually found one letter. Maybe I could share it with you.
Oh, I think you should.
I showed it to you. It was written in, the woman, I don't know how many years of school she did, but basically I understood that she just came out of prison, the previous person living in our flat. And one person from the prison had written her a letter. And it was, in Scottish dialect, but, the way that you pronounce it. I was like, wow, I'm reading it, and it's supposed to be English, and I don't understand.
For me, that was quite a read. I was like,
I give it to you. Have a look. I found, this is really a real treasure for me. I'm into linguistics, but to think that there are people who actually write like that.
This is the thing. They're making a big thing in schools now to, revive Scots, which I think is really nice because it's heritage and all of that. But I think they're doing it at too young an age. The stage 2 kids who came in and were reciting poems and stuff, they were all in Scots. Now, these kids are not good enough at plain English. Do Scots in senior school when they've already established the proper spelling and grammar. And then this is additional because we did Shakespeare, when we were at school, and that's not normal English either. But we did that at secondary school, not in primary, because in primary they're still learning to read and write and spell. So leave the Scots to the secondary, but here they really, really want to instill the heritage from a young age, which I actually think is great, but I actually think it's going to do a lot of harm to their spelling and grammar.
Do schools still teach Latin? Because I remember my English class was, you always got the Latin with the English to kind of, in terms of roots, so kind of like Arabic, this is the root word, this is where it comes from, this is what it means, and
I never got taught any of that when I was in school. No.
They used to even teach Gaelic before, when we were little, but they don't teach it anymore. I think now they're trying to
revive
bring it back.
But,
I wanted to ask about homework, because how you were saying, we want to all be on the same page. So if a student doesn't do their homework, we, at the end of the day, we don't want to be one harsh, one, not harsh. So I don't know if we want to agree on a certain policy that we all do the same thing. And I'm talking about older children, not the younger ones. When I send in homework with stage 2, I send it just to complement our teaching. And I say, okay, it's due on that day, but
But I have to agree, because what I usually get with my girls is, I've totally done the homework.
Oh, it's in my mum's car.
I know. The best excuse I have lately, it's in Jenny's car.
How bad it is that you're being a teacher and a parent.
But I've done it so like you can't demerit me. I can do exactly what I want. If it's not in my class, it means it's not done. You know.
Yeah.
Like, but I did do it. But yeah, we need a policy that's across the board that we can all kind of say.
Yeah, so that they wouldn't say that this teacher is mean and the other one is nice.
Sometimes like in stage 4 I've said, well, okay, if this is, and I've started keeping a record of the ones like who don't do their homework. So if it's your second time, then like I kept the other day two kids for detention just because they don't like I've had their names down, and but I was just thinking, like if we all did the same thing, like you were saying about everything, about discipline, about this, it'll make it easier. So I don't know if we can even agree on something.
It depends what you use, I think, because if you've got workbooks that they usually take home and that's what they do their homework in, writing a note for their parent in the book would make sure that their parent sees it, but they don't always use books. And the thing is, like a note, I always like to send a note home to the parent, a nice kind note, because it's not the parent, just to let them know that so-and-so didn't do the homework. If he doesn't do the homework again, there will be X consequence, and you guys can decide as a school like what that consequence should be. But I would make, again, parents should sign the form and you get it back, because otherwise they're not going to give the form to the parent.
Like we made, the sheet for the pencil cases. Maybe we should have one ready there so we can copy and give to the child and make a deal that they have to actually bring it back with the signature. But maybe not the first time, but the second time the homework is not done, you have to take this letter home and
even give the parent's signature is very, very hard. I've been giving report every month to the kids to give to their parents, sign it up and bring it back. So it will be in their folder. Anytime the parent comes, this is the report and this is how he done or she done. But asking them to bring it back, even if you show some punishment, they still didn't bring it up. Or at the end, sometimes they bring it up without the parent's signature.
But so maybe because we only do it in class, none of us do it. It doesn't have the same effect. If we all did the same thing, if we all had say a similar letter to this pencil case, that you should bring with you, and then half of the class doesn't bring. If we have the same, and if we can have copies in class.
I completely give up on that. I have my own pencils and rubbers.
That's not helpful, because then they think it's okay.
They're not learning. You know what? They're not learning. They're not learning the responsibility of, the fact that you have to have your own, and your parents need to learn as well that they should, send it with you as well.
As long as they do a good job in the class, I can sacrifice anything. I can do anything.
You come in with a stock.
Yes, for everything.
Yes, but then they will think, it's fine, this is Amal.
I always say, please get your pencil case, check it.
Stage 3 was the worst, actually. When I did one Friday, I did the wall, I thought it was Friday.
Yes, they do.
Or a Thursday.
But
anyway,
are the best
one day I
in
did
their
the
work.
whole FLA. I actually had to print, and listen, 60 copies of that letter. It's not always just the pencil case. Sometimes it's the glue, or they don't have a rubber and coloring pencils. They just brought in a pencil and but it's not always the whole thing. But then I took off pencil case and wrote what was missing. But basically 60 letters. How many kids we have? Again. So basically, it is an issue. Most of them have at least something. Some of them have nothing, and they still come in and but I'm gonna borrow from my neighbour.
Maybe in the beginning of prior to FLA starting, I don't know what other schools do, but Ayana school, they literally said that exacting lists. You need to get 12 colouring pencils from Lakeland. You need a HB pencil. That's this. It's so specific, and they let you know it's your responsibility. Ayana school stuff. Every single pencil is named. Every rubber is named. Her pencil case, So if the teachers get that, if the parents get that before FLA starts, so when we are preparing for the like the school year and then the FLA year.
I did give the
They're
letter
bad.
to the
Being
stage
very
ones,
hard.
but everybody else who was already in,
Well,
they
we
just got
got,
an
we got a
email.
message before FLA starts. This was like in the beginning of August when you started, and even as a parent or I went out and I made sure like my kids had a pencil with the glue because we've not done it before, and I was like, yeah, I'll make sure.
But the parents
know.
doesn't take it as
They don't
serious
take it
as the
seriously,
other
no.
school.
But then
Parent
you know
doesn't
what?
take
My-
FLA as serious as other school, never.
What
They-
I would do in that case is, if it was just me in charge of everything, call all the parents in and sit them down. You're paying X amount of money to send your child here, right? Which, by the way, is a joke because you're getting it for nothing, basically. You send your child here. There's rights and responsibilities on both sides, right? You pay for them to come here, and then they're not reaping the rewards because they don't have a glue stick to do their work, or they don't have a pencil to do their work. It's up to you. And if you're struggling, how about this? We'll make up the pencil cases, but then you have to pay the price that I demand to buy the pencil case from me. If you genuinely don't have the time, you don't want to make the effort, you're not bothered, here's a pencil case, I'll have £5, please. You could do that much cheaper
One
yourself.
of my suggestion is to have more parents meeting.
We need
Yes.
The
that.
parents should come in. Actually,
And
yes,
we need
really
the
to
parents
have parent
evening as well,
engagement.
like the other schools. So at least twice in the year, one at the first semester and the second is the second half, to get to know the parents and to have face-to-face talk. They feel we are serious and they will reflect back on that serious. But this far away relation is
Do you know that takes
not-
time though? Because I feel like
it does.
the culture that we're trying to create in FLA, the whole reason this was started, the kind of vision behind it, is that we create a culture that's the opposite of the masjid or the madrasas, where everything is so loosely done
Yeah.
and so vaguely organized. And that's what we've come to expect from our Quran learning and, you know, the kind of etiquette that goes with it. Parents are used to that. That's how they were brought up. Maybe they've already been accustomed to it with their kids before they came here. So changing that culture is actually changing. It's a mental shift
It's even
in
shifted it
parents.
from the start of FLA
Yeah.
because when it started, we provided all those things.
Yeah.
So now we're saying, oh, you have to bring your own stuff. So it's just maybe even time that's going to take. Oh, they have to get used to.
But I do think getting the parents more, like getting in and like knowing the parents better really helps. They're doing that even in the schools across Dundee now as well, because they're realising that they're trying to raise literacy and numeracy and blah, 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 and all of the kids. But you can't just teach things like that in class. Things need to be carried on and the environment needs to be changed at home. So they are getting parents a lot more involved. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but parents do need to be more involved, and parents need to realise that coming to FLA is actually a privilege as well. There are going to be other kids who would love to come here and can't.
It's not a babysitting service.
No, so they are actually privileged kids.
It does.
I was going
I
to just
feel
bring up
sad.
something. There are some
Very
kids at
sad.
FLA who come from really, really, really struggling backgrounds. Is there any provision to like help them? Like what? I only know of one family in particular because I've had phone calls from the health visitors and stuff who've been visiting their family, and they're struggling to like quite a great extent. That like and I know they come here. I don't know whether they're allowed off their fees or like this pencil case issue and things like that. I mean, like to the extent that food banks are delivering food to their house. So they're struggling to that level. Like the health visitor only found a massive bag of rice, and they've got many children, including a baby in the
This
house.
was the family we were talking
Yeah. Like, so we've been delivering kind of like nappies and like I've been delivering meat and stuff to make sure they get some protein, because like 2 of the children, the baby is okay because the baby's breastfed, but the toddler is actually deficient in certain things and getting bone problems and stuff, and that's why the NHS has gotten involved. And to know that within our community, as in, you know, we have people who are suffering to that level here,
It's very nice.
it breaks my heart. And I don't know, is there something that as
We don't
FLA
have an official policy for that.
Yeah.
We have the possibility of the parents who are struggling, you know, they come in, and if they tell us, then we can,
they wouldn't tell.
reduce the. But there's
the
a
thing.
question that we
That's
didn't
what the
know
health visitor
unless
told
someone
us.
comes and tells us,
Yeah.
or they come and tell
They
us.
never
and
even
can we please-
complained when the health visitor
Well,
went.
see,
It was a matter of
about
observation.
Half the problem
sponsoring kids.
is
We
this.
need to. We need this from the policy of the FLA
With that has
to release that people can sponsor kids studying in the FLA. There are so many willing people to do it, but
There
they
might be
need
others. I just know about this one.
official paper to say yes.
Because even the fees,
So-
for example, FLA is making a massive loss.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It doesn't make a profit because the fees are set that way because we know that the vast majority of people would not be able to afford more than that,
Yeah.
and that's still a loss. But as far as anything else goes, we need to have policies for other people who would come in and sponsor children.
Yeah.
Like things like, you know, pencil cases and all that. Yeah, I mean, we can look into that, but it's a bigger issue.
Because I would never, for example, with like, if that one of those children was in my class and they didn't have their pencil case, I'm not going to bring that up because I don't want them to go home and have that pressure on their parents.
But that's because
When they're,
we don't
I know
really
that's
know,
exactly
and we need
it.
to and like that's quite
Yeah.
upsetting because like, if you think this a kid I might have been harsh on and they don't actually have the money to that's sad.
That's why I love my class because my class is always there. They're always eating in my class, so I feel like at least they're getting good fruit and veg. Yeah, I'm like because I don't know what they're gonna have at home, so I'm like here.
Yeah. What we can maybe do, I don't know if it's doable here, but I guess they do it in normal schools that they have some sort of link with the city council, so they know which parents are struggling.
Yeah.
So these people already, like if there's for example they don't pay for the food for the children.
Yes, they have school
So
lunch,
if we
3
could
school
have
lunches.
the same kind of information, for example, that we could forward the list of our pupils to
I was
someone
gonna
who would be able to
say-
say that this or that family is struggling. So we could,
I work in the education department, but I don't think they're not allowed to release that information unless
and also
the parents
there's
say.
another distinction to be made: the difference between state-funded schools and what is essentially a private facility.
Yes, but
So
we
there's,
could
it's
ask.
not the same.
I don't know, like when they first enter, I'm sure they have to fill in some forms and details and like emergency contacts and blah. You could add a question there, in your school, do you receive free school meals? And if they want to answer that, and then you can say like yes, no, or prefer not to answer, and they know they should be made sure that they know that this is confidential, but at least that way the parent is the one telling us that yes.
In Scottish schools, a free primary 1 to 3.
It's everyone.
free.
That's new.
So
yeah,
that would
that's
only
new.
apply from 4 and above.
Yeah.
But even like a question about benefit, if you receive benefits,
Yeah.
then this might be
Something.
But like about if you're aware of kids, then I think maybe you should be in contact with.
Well,
them.
I did mention because when one came in, because there's been a couple of families that the food bank has delivered to that have been Muslim, and actually some I've phoned up and I've been like, do you require like halal? And they're like, no, as long as there's no pork, we're fine. But others of them, they're like, yeah, we'd appreciate it if it was halal and stuff. So in those cases, like I do ask, Caitlin, because I think, okay, if they've got kids, then maybe they are in FLA or something. I don't know. And obviously there's going to be tons more out there, but at least the ones who are walking through this door, I kind of do feel like we have a bit of a responsibility
I did
to
talk
try
to
and...
the mom, the one that we were talking. I didn't want to ask her,
No.
directly.
Yeah.
I just kind of, so how, doing and everything. And I said, she's like, alhamdulillah, no, everything's perfect, everything's
that's
fine.
what she even said that on the
I
phone.
can't just tell her,
Yeah.
listen, do
I
you
know.
need...
I might get in touch with her again because I actually went round and delivered some stuff the first time. The second time it was somebody else who was doing the deliveries that day because I was teaching. But that night, like the next week, the daughter came to me and she's like, oh, miss, those bags downstairs, some of them came to our house. I was like,
But if they can
really?
afford putting their kids in the FLA, this means they have.
This means they're not eating.
No, you know what it means, Amal?
It's a
They're
priority.
prioritising Islamic
They see that
education.
Quran and this is so important. If like
Yeah.
Sam is telling you, she's seen a person in FLA, she's seen their house, and yet the parent are still paying for their child without any discount, because if they were having any sort of discount, you know, you would know. And they're paying for that, and their house is empty. There's like, you know.
She was so excited. I was like, was your mum happy? She goes, oh yeah. I was like, did you enjoy it? She's like, oh yeah. She was so excited. And I was just like, honestly, my heart inside. Obviously, because the rest of the kids were all there, she had no, because obviously she's too young to understand the concept. And so she was just super excited about it. So I tried to make it something nice when I was talking to her. But inside I was just like, oh my God, my heart's breaking.
There are some people who would never come and ask
for
help.
They
but
wouldn't.
I think it's our duty, if we know that, you know, they should get
both
whatever
the Muslim
help
families that I've
should.
dealt with, it's literally been because they've had home visits for one reason or another, and people have noticed the situation inside the house. This person also, like, the health visitor was such a lovely lady, the one I was talking to, so she did everything else. She was like, she noticed there weren't any toys or anything for the kids and things like that, so she went and got donations and stuff and took them over as well. So she was trying to do her bit. I said, I gave them the contact number for Amina, the resource centre, and things like that. And the health visitor was encouraging the mum to get out and about and go to like DIWC, because there are things that you can do to go out and socialise that are not expensive. Relatively, they've been here I think over a year now. Like, because
they came from abroad.
The teachers not know. So like obviously.
So the benefit system will not help.
No, they're not eligible for anything.
All of us, but whoever is teaching that class, you know, should probably know, just to, you know, like, I'm not harsh on a student who would be like that, because I would feel so bad about myself going home and thinking.
This has nothing to do with teaching, because if you are doing something in the class, it will be discrimination. So in the system of the school, they need to help them from behind the scene, but in front, all the kids are the same. If you start, oh, this is poor, and this is. But this is also sometimes, if you see bad behavior, sometimes it reflects something else. So should we go?
But I think as teachers, I don't know if we're not school teachers, we're here like FLA teachers, whatever you want to call it. But I always find, in my experience anyway, it's very important that you know who you're teaching. Very important, because whether it's the attitude that they have towards the class or towards you or towards the work, or you know, just whatever it is.
The words you use,
you ask them, did you have a nice day today? Was everything okay? And you get a lot more from them. And some people wait behind at the end of the class saying, "Well, this happened and that happened." You know, you had no idea. And sometimes, if you notice, as Muslims as well, like, you know, you have that softness towards our children, and to, you know, give them a chance and to give them something that they don't get anywhere else. I think it's really
I don't think, like, you don't treat them any differently, but for example, you might watch how you speak. Like, for example, if you have a child who, you know, their father passed away, if you're having a lesson, stuff like that, you might not bring up the word dad or something that week, you know what I mean? Just to cater to that. Like, when I'm talking about food with my class, like, when they were tasting different foods, some of them, like, when it came to some foods, they were like, ugh. I was like, there is no such thing as ugh. There are some foods that you think are yummy and some foods that are not really for you, but no foods are, you know what I mean? Because I know there's a child in the class who, you know what I mean, like, doesn't have a lot of food in their house. So
it's not just to that individual, you do it for
everyone.